And just first of all, to start by saying thank you for attending this morning. My name's Ailsa Anderson, and I'm team leader of the Place Information and Delivery team. And I'll be taking you through the introduction to today's session and covering a few elements of the call for ideas, which we expect to launch very soon. We hope to update you, and we've put in the invite a link to the agenda, and you'll see from the slide here that we've got a link to the QR code, which takes you directly to the LDP webpage, which will be updated. In terms of housekeeping for today, just before we begin, this meeting will be recorded, and we'd be most grateful if you could keep your microphones and cameras off unless you're speaking. Use the hands up feature and the chat function if you've got any questions. And we're encouraging informal discussion and questions following the presentations that we'll give to you this morning. And just to confirm that a copy of the recording and slides will be shared with you following the meeting. Just by way of the agenda, what we hope to cover today, Paul's going to kick us off by way of a formal welcome. And we're then going to just provide a quick update on where we're currently at with the local development plan, provide an overview of the call for ideas and the emerging spatial strategy, and then go into the details of it for this morning, which are around the call for ideas and the call for sites, forms and processes. We're also hoping to touch upon local place plans and an existing site audit that the team have been undertaking before we go on to look ahead at the next steps and the key dates. And then finally, we'll open the floor to questions and discussions at the end. So in addition to the officers presenting today, we have in attendance a number of members of the policy team and the place information and delivery team to help answer questions as well. So with that, I'll just pass on to Paul, who's going to formally open the forum and give a short welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Ailsa. You're a hard act to follow with that opening. If you don't know me, I'm the Head of Planning and Economy for the Council, and this is my 5th year in post, and I think probably going to be the most exciting, having been through one LDP in Aberdeenshire, but now kind of picking up a head of steam in terms of how we develop the next local development plan for Aberdeenshire. And I think you'll see from the agenda today, there's a great opportunity for not only our communities, industry and landowners in Aberdeenshire to participate in the new local development plan process, but also to help mould and shape what Aberdeenshire is going to look like over the next decade. So I'm quite excited, as I'm sure you all are, at the opportunities that the team will be presenting to you today in terms of how you can be involved and actually how we're going to go about moving forward with the development of the next local development plan for Aberdeenshire. I think the team are on the call today. They've done a great job in getting us this far. If you don't know, our evidence report was reported to full council last week and was approved on the nod. There were no questions, no vote either. The members were satisfied with the level of engagement with the questions that they had that had been answered, as well as the input from our communities, from our landowners and from our different sectors in Aberdeenshire. So we're in a good place. The evidence report has now been submitted to the government, and we'll await their response. But in the meantime, we're going to get on with the call for ideas stage, which in many respects is one of the most exciting parts of the plan making process, where we'll start to get an understanding of the land to be safeguarded from development, but also the land to be allocated for development. As most of you will know, we have been quite aspirational in terms of the housing numbers that we want to achieve over the next 10 years of the new plan period. And part of that is about ensuring that we allocate land that is deliverable. So you all will have quite a significant role to play in ensuring that the land that you do submit for allocation in the plan, especially for housing or for commercial development, that is deliverable and can be delivered within the 10 years of the plan. I'm not going to extend the welcome any longer. There's a stacked agenda. There's a lot to get through today. So again, welcome to meeting. The team are on online and available to answer any questions as the presentations come forward. And as you know, my doors are always open, so if you do have any matters that you want to discuss or raise with me, please get in touch. Ailsa, I'll leave it there and hand back to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Paul. Yeah, so in terms of where we're currently at, as Paul's alluded to, we've made significant progress in the last few weeks, and the evidence report was approved by full council on the 26th of June, having been considered by area committees and infrastructure services committee earlier this year. It was subsequently submitted for gate check on Friday, 27th of June, with the assessment expected to take 3 to 4 months. Any eagle-eyed agents within the forum today may have noticed that we do now appear on the DPA website, with the evidence report currently going through registration checks. And I have noticed this morning that they have started uploading documents, so that bodes well for us getting through those checks. And then moving on to the next stage, the call for ideas, we are hoping to launch in early July. So given today's the 1st of July, we are expecting it to be launched imminently. It will form 2 components, a call for sites closing on the 31st of October and a broader call for ideas closing at the end of the year. The call for ideas is open to everyone, and we're keen to stress that in accordance with the Scottish Government guidance. And whilst housing is a large component of the local development plan, we are looking to ensure that it captures all the views of Aberdeenshire's community. And with that in mind, we are engaging widely with our elected members, communities and community councils, young people, veterans, retired residents, yourselves as a development industry, key agencies and seldom heard groups. Continuing with the awareness raising, to support this, we are preparing promotional materials for settlements, for example, placing on community notice boards. We'll also be producing a few short films and issuing press releases and undertaking social media presence throughout the call for ideas. We're also intending on attending in-person community events, mainly farmers markets, over the coming months. We are at this point undertaking perhaps one in each area where we can. And this is instead of our usual drop-in style events that we would normally undertake. We're also seeking opportunities to engage with the council's place plans and where events are being carried out for engagement activities associated with them, covering catchments, academy catchments, but so far the timing hasn't quite aligned for that. But we will continue to work with colleagues to see if we can join up to avoid any engagement fatigue that might be out there. In terms of our community engagement, I thought it might just be worthwhile flagging to you that we are working closely with the Community Council forums and through direct outreach. We're offering to attend individual meetings to discuss any ideas that a community might want to scope out before formally submitting. And we have been flagging to community councils that they may be contacted by landowners or developers regarding potential bid sites. Ultimately, it's up to community councils to decide themselves on what level of engagement they wish to have. It's not really the role for the council to be facilitating discussions between any prospective site and the community. So we would take a steer from the communities themselves as to how they wish to undertake their engagement there. In terms of the emerging spatial strategy, I thought it might be useful just to touch on this just as we go into the call for ideas. Based on our evidence report, our emerging spatial strategy is likely to be built around a central vision and guiding principles, which kind of will probably come as no surprise to the folk in attending today. Obviously, we're hoping to take a place-based approach with emphasis aligning with the place principle and the 6 qualities of successful places. NPF4 alignment, so that the strategy will be focused around NPF4 themes: sustainable places, livable places and productive places, and building in climate resilience as well. So with that in mind, we see 6 broad themes coming forward, which again are unlikely to be a surprise. So settlement strategy and growth management, housing and local living, transport and connectivity, environment and climate action, economy and infrastructure, and implementation and delivery. So just to touch upon those in a wee bit more detail, in terms of settlement growth, we are focusing on existing settlements, directing growth to areas with existing infrastructure and services. Preferably, we will be taking a brownfield first approach. However, we recognise that viability can often be a constraint with brownfield sites, and they may be more challenging to deliver, but that should not be a reason to not prioritise brownfield. Looking at greenbelt protection, retaining and extending the Aberdeen greenbelt to prevent coalescence and manage some of the sprawl of communities. And rural development is obviously an important one for our area as well, and trying to balance infrastructure constraints and sustainability. Within housing and local living, we do have our local housing land requirement of 12,740 units, which exceeds the MATHLR significantly. And that will obviously be subject to assessment as part of the evidence report. So it will be very interesting to see what the reporter makes of what we presented there in particular. And then trying to build in local living and the 20-minute neighbourhood principles and promoting local living where feasible, and particularly within our larger and academy towns. In terms of transport and connectivity, sustainable transport and prioritising development in accessible areas will be a priority, and trying to reduce car dependency. However, again, we recognise that we do live in a rural area where car reliance is high. We also recognise that there are pinch points on our road networks, and particularly around the likes of West Hill and Ellen and along the A90 corridor. In terms of environment and climate, we are looking at our nature networks and protecting and enhancing ecological connectivity and biodiversity. Flood risk and coastal erosion, trying to avoid development in high-risk areas, and obviously taking cognizance of recent changes, particularly with regards to the SEPA flood mapping. Recognising the energy transition and supporting renewable infrastructure where possible, and trying to ensure that we're supporting zero waste as well, and the circular economy principles. In terms of the economy and infrastructure, ensuring that we've got sufficient business land in well-located employment areas to support economic diversification. Community wealth building, embedding local resilience and inclusive growth, digital infrastructure, and trying to identify any connectivity gaps, especially within our rural areas, and obviously taking an infrastructure first approach and coordinating development with infrastructure capacity and investment priorities. And finally, implementation and delivery, trying to look at this from the outset in terms of the site selection methodology, which is within our evidence report, focusing on deliverability, again, infrastructure capacity, marketability, and alignment with our spatial principles. We'll be bringing forward a delivery programme to accompany the proposed plan, which will detail actions and responsibilities, and importantly, where possible, looking at funding. But again, there are challenges with that particular element. So looking at delivery from the outset rather than perhaps it being more of an afterthought. And with that, monitoring and review, ongoing evaluation of things like housing delivery and our performance and the effectiveness of our policies. So with that in mind, I'm just going to pass over to Emma briefly, who's going to cover local place plans.
Emma, we can't hear you.
Morning, is that any better?
Yeah, that's you.
Perfect, thank you. So sorry, and this is just a very brief overview of our local place plans. They have been received really well by our community councils and they're progressing well since their introduction. We currently have 6 registered local place plans in Aboyne, Bankery, Foveran, Inchmarlow, Newton Hill and Stonehaven, 4 of which have already informed the evidence report. And in addition to that, we've got 8 other communities that are continuing to develop their local place plan. All the registered local place plans will automatically be considered as part for the call for ideas process, and the communities will not need to resubmit any of the proposals. Proposals from the local place plans will also be mapped and they'll be published alongside any other submissions that we receive through the call for ideas. And this will help us kind of showcase the ambitions and the priorities of our communities. Currently, all our registered local place plans can be viewed on our website, just using the link that's in the slide. That'll be shared at the end. And the next slide just shows the approximate timescales for our local place plans that are currently still being developed. So we're expecting local place plans in from the following community council areas: Crathis, Inverurie, Rhynie, Bankery Devenick, West Hill, Peterhead, Ellen and Benahee. And what we'd really like to sort of try and get across today is just to really recommend taking cognizance of these registered local place plans in the areas, as these really reflect the community's aspirations and their priorities for land use and development. And early engagement with these plans may be able to help ensure that proposals are better aligned with the local expectations and may strengthen sort of any case for a bid submission. We hope that the registered local place plans will create some opportunities for collaborative working and helping to connect the dots between communities and yourselves and contributing to a more joined up place-based approach. And I'll just hand back to yourself, Ailsa.
Super, thank you, Emma. So on the next slide, I thought it might be just useful to provide a wee fly through of our call for ideas survey form. This is different to how we've approached the call for sites and the call for responses to the main issues report in the previously. We are looking to take a fairly online approach to the call for ideas this time round, and we are using ARC GIS to help us coordinate this. So Kathy, if you're able just to start the fly through there. We've hopefully provided this in such a way that it's open for a range of ideas to come forward. There's quite a bit of preamble there, but that is mostly directed towards community groups and the fact that this is a new process. We've got the general privacy notice and we need certain details from you in order to validate and acknowledge your submission. There is the opportunity, if representing another party, that you can place their details in. And we've broken it up into place and policy. So if your idea is round about a specific place, then by all means you can either describe where that place is or draw a polygon for us, which clearly identifies where it is that you're referring to. We then also have the opportunity to touch upon any policy matters, and these are aligning with National Planning Framework 4 and our evidence report as well. So when it comes to processing any comments, we will have a clear structure in which to follow. And then it is quite a simple form in terms of being able to provide any ideas, and then there is the opportunity to submit. We will then take it and validate it and provide you with a acknowledgement with a reference number. And the final thing I would say on the call for ideas, it is easier for us if it is one idea per submission. So it may be that you feel that you're submitting lots of different ideas, but just from a managing the outputs, it helps us just to, if you can break it down for us into the different ideas and the policies or the places that they relate to as well. So yeah, it's a very simple form. Hopefully it's relatively self-explanatory once it becomes available, and compared to the call for sites form, this one should be pretty straightforward to complete and available to all. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Fiona Thompson now, who's going to take you through the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Ilse. So this next little bit, we're going to be discussing the existing site audit. So this is just to give you a bit of a background in terms of some of the work that we've been doing. So the existing site audit is part of the initial work for the next local development plan, and we're carrying out an audit of all of the existing sites contained within the 2023 local development plan. So we're assessing them on their progress with a view of possibly removing sites which are not showing any signs of delivery. So the reason that we're doing this is because of the Scottish Government's guidance in the 2023 report that came out, which notes that no site should automatically be rolled forward from one plan to another. So this means that all of the sites proposed to be included within the next local development plan will be assessed to ensure that they are deliverable. So in terms of the assessment that we are carrying out, so we have carried this out for the 355 opportunity sites that are currently allocated, and the assessment has been carried out on each site with all of the information that's available to us at the 1st of June 2025. And as you can see on the slides, we've gathered a vast range of information, which includes information from the 2024 House and Land Audit, the delivery programme, and also we've conducted a lot of desktop reviews, so including planning applications, building warrants, completion certificates, and we've also had discussion with our development management colleagues to ensure that we have the relevant information on the progress of each of the individual planning applications and sites that are allocated. So this has allowed us to gather information on individual planning status and construction status of each of the sites. And this information has then allowed us to categorise all of the housing and employment sites into 5 distinct categories, which I will go on to explain on the next slide. So as I mentioned, there are the 5 different categories, which you can see on the screen. So starting with the grey sites, these are sites that are now complete and will remain within the settlement boundary, but will be removed as an allocation from the next local development plan. The blue sites are sites that are currently under construction and are expected to be complete prior to the adoption of the next local development plan, so before the 31st of March 2029. The green sites are currently sites that are under construction and again have been assessed that they are expected to continue to develop during the next plan period. So for example, Cruden Bay OP1 or Mintlaw OP2, these sites are noted as not requiring to submit a bid during the call for sites process, as they've been assessed through the existing site audit as being deliverable sites. So orange sites are sites that are currently have planning permission, but they don't currently have planning. They're not currently under construction. So this means in order for them to ensure that these are deemed to be deliverable, we are looking for the site proposer to submit a bid during the call for sites process. And then finally, the red sites, these have been assessed where there's no live plan permission. And again, if these sites were to be wanting to be taken forward to the next local development plan, then a bid would be required and evidence would be required as to how the site can be deemed to be deliverable within the next plan period. So on the next slide, you'll be able to see a screenshot of some of the information. I appreciate that it's small, but this information will be available on the website in the next little while. And it shows that the mix of sites that have come through the assessment process. So of the 355 sites, the majority of the sites have been classed as red. So there was 170 sites that were classed as red and will require a new bid should the site be wished to continue in the next local development plan. So of the sites that are there are 89 sites that are classed as green and under construction, and they will continue to build out during the next local development plan. So these green sites equate to approximately 52% of the local house and land requirement that has come through the evidence report. And then one thing I will also note is that through the proposed plan and preparing it, we will also do another review to see if there's any status of the sites have changed, and then we'll update the existing site audit at that particular point. So just finally to highlight some of the work that we have also been doing alongside the existing site audit. So that first piece was primarily focused on the opportunity sites, but we have also been doing some work on the reserved sites. So we've been looking at which reserved sites are allocated. Do these still require to be allocated? Has there been sort of a change in different processes? So we're currently getting updates on whether these sites are required to remain within the local development plan. And then if they are just a site for a reserved function and they don't form part of a bigger OP1 site, this information, if required, to submit a call for ideas, this will be through that. But if it's part of a bigger OP site, then that should come through the call for sites when you're putting in a bid for an OP site at that point. And I will now just pass on to Lisa to take you through the call for sites in slightly more detail.
Great, thanks, Fiona. Yep, so I'll be taking you through the call for sites. So as Elsa mentioned, as part of the wider call for ideas, we're also launching a call for sites. So this is very similar to the previous call for bids process that we undertook for the last LDP. So the call for sites is specifically aimed at developers, landowners, or the community who are looking to promote a site for inclusion in the next local development plan. The survey is open to a variety of uses and proposals, but those with the most potential to be successful are those that can shown to be deliverable, sustainable, and supported by the content of MPF4. And as Fiona just kind of mentioned, for those seeking to protect or reserve a site for uses such as recreational space, a cemetery, or other community uses, this should be done through the separate call for ideas process. We would encourage proposals that include the reuse of reuse or redevelopment of brownfield, vacant, or derelict buildings or sites. And for housing proposals, we would encourage sites that help address the priority needs of affordable housing in Aberdeenshire, as set out in the evidence report. And it should be noted that for any proposed housing sites, only sites of 4 units and above will be accepted in the call for sites, as the LDP only allocates sites of this scale. So as I mentioned, MPF4 puts an emphasis on the importance of proposed sites being deliverable. Therefore, regardless of the presence of any constraints impacting the proposed site, it is essential that bid proposers demonstrate that the suggested location is deliverable. This is because only those submissions that show an acceptable level of deliverability will be considered for allocation in the proposed plan. And due to the emphasis on deliverability, if a site is currently allocated in the 2023 LDP, this does not mean that the site will be considered suitable for allocation in the forthcoming LDP, as Fiona's just covered in her slides. Thanks, Kathy. If we just move on to the next slide. So similar to what Elsa took you through for the call for ideas form, I'm going to take you through the call for sites survey form. This one's a bit longer and little bit more comprehensive than the call for ideas form, but I'll take you through it, and hopefully you'll get an idea of what the form looks like and what kind of information we're asking for. So Kathy, if you just start the run through, thank you. So we have quite a comprehensive guidance note, including information on what can be suggested, what to consider, which includes various resources available to assist with the completion of the survey. We also cover how to make a submission, and then what the specific conditions to be met are. So this is a list mainly of key elements of MPF4, and then we look at how the bid will be processed, so give some information on that. And then we're obviously asking for the privacy notice, and then we move on to the About You page. So that's general contact details, and then looking for the role or interest in the proposal, details of who's being represented, as well as any land ownership details or engagement that may have taken place. And then we have the site details page. So this is asking for the location and name of the proposed site. And here the site boundary can either be drawn on the map or a site boundary uploaded via PDF. We're then looking for any relevant planning history of the site, so such as planning applications or previous bids that have been submitted, any input that's been received from communities, as well as the current and proposed use of the site. And then at the end, there's also an opportunity just to give a short description of the proposal. And the next section is looking at the deliverability of the proposal. So this is looking at factors such as market demand, tenure mix, housing density, and proposed phasing. So this is asking for the projected completions per year. It also asks for any expected constraints that may impact the site, as well as we're looking for an indication of confidence of viability of the site. Then from there, the next section is to do with how sites contribute to local living. And then after that, the next section asks for information on infrastructure. So this includes site access, road network capacity, as well as other services such as education, healthcare, waste and recycling facilities. It also asks for details on what utilities are available, as well as any other assessments that have been undertaken. Moving on, the survey then asks for the benefits of the proposed development to be listed. And then finally, we give an opportunity to provide an additional supporting statement or information to support the proposal. So as you can see, we're not asking for a huge amount of information at this stage. We're more kind of interested in whether any assessments have been undertaken or not, rather than the assessments themselves. Then going forward, when we get past the technical assessment, it will likely be more of a dialogue between officers and bid proposers in terms of more detailed information. Thanks, Kathy. If you could just move on to the next slide. Thank you. So within the surveys, we have provided links to various resources, as I touched upon. So this is to assist with completing the forms as accurately as possible. Just to cover some of the resources, we've included a link to the DPA's website. So that's where the evidence report, as well as the suite of submitted supporting information, can be accessed. We also have a mapped version of the infrastructure audit RAG analysis to assist in identifying any infrastructure constraints within settlements. We also have a link to the local place plans register. So that's for consideration of the local community's aspirations. And we've also put together an interactive map which provides details on a variety of constraints and other important factors across Aberdeenshire. Additionally, with this interactive map, as new development bids are submitted, the map will be populated to show where these are being submitted. So once we have received the bids through the call for sites, we've tried to put together an assessment process to set out how we will determine what bids will be identified for inclusion in the proposed plan. So to take you through the process briefly, once the bids are received, policy officers will undertake an initial technical assessment of the bids. So we're in the process of finalising our bid site assessment guidance at the moment, but this outlines the steps for policy officers to follow to undertake the technical assessment. In one of the following slides, I'll talk you through the bid assessment process to give you an idea of what is entailed, but I would emphasise that it's still being refined at this stage. So once officers have been through the technical assessment, we'll have two initial outcomes. So initial outcome 1 is where a bid is identified as a potential development site, and initial outcome 2, where a bid is identified as unsuitable for development. Embedded in the bids identified in initial outcome 1, officers will identify indicative options for key agencies' feedback. So these are either preferred options or reasonable alternatives. So these are indicative recommendations at this stage for key agencies reference only, and the bid proposers will not be notified of the indicative recommendation. So once we've sought feedback from key agencies, as well as the FIRS group, we will review the initial outcome 1 options based on the feedback received. Following this, we will then seek the views of local members through seminars, giving them a steer of what officers have found to be preferred options and reasonable alternatives. We will also seek the views of communities at this stage. And then based on the views, we will revisit the bid assessment in case any elements need to be reviewed based on feedback received. And then from this, we will then determine one of 3 outcomes. So outcome 1 being that the bid is identified as a preferred option for inclusion in the proposed plan. Outcome 2, that the bid has been identified as a reasonable alternative, and outcome 3, that the bid has been identified as unsuccessful, and is as such unsuitable for inclusion in the proposed plan. So just on this slide, following on from the process map, I've included this as it just provides a bit of a more simplified outline of the process map for your reference, as we'll be sharing the slides with you after the meeting. So in terms of the steps involved in the technical assessment that I mentioned previously, I'll just take you through them briefly. So step 1 includes evaluating whether there are exceptional reasons why development should be permitted if there is an impact from proposals on sites designated for nature conservation, peatland, or if there is a flood, landslip, or erosion risk. Also presence of strategic energy infrastructure or impact on open space. Otherwise, preference is for the avoidance of such areas. Step 2 looks at the distribution of development. So this is assessing the proposals against the 6 core spatial distribution priorities as outlined in the evidence report. So these are housing need, infrastructure capacity, sustainable transport, living locally, consumer demand, and the Aberdeenshire Place Strategy and local place plans. So step 3 involves assessing the site deliverability against 5 deliverability tests. So these tests include ownership, cost to develop, infrastructure constraints, marketability, and access and legal burdens. Moving on to step 4, this is where the detailed site assessment will take place. So this will include whether the proposal provides commitment to meeting key elements of NPF 4 and other conditions to be met by the bid proposer in their submission, as well as to consider other benefits of the proposal. Step 5 includes the site visits to confirm site boundaries and evaluate development opportunities and constraints. And then finally, in step 6, officers will be drawing a conclusion as to whether the site presents a potential development opportunity or if the site is constrained and therefore unsuitable for inclusion in the proposed plan. So hopefully that gives an idea of what is involved in the technical assessment of the bid sites. As I mentioned, we're still refining this this assessment process, but yeah, we're getting there with it. I'll now hand back to Ailsa to take you through the dates involved in the process we've outlined.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate that we're obviously throwing quite a bit of information at you. So it'll probably make a lot more sense once the call for ideas is launched and in the public domain, and you can start going through it with a fine-tooth comb then. But we did think it was important to try and get as much information out as possible in advance of the call for ideas being launched. But just in terms of looking ahead and key dates, based on our current thinking, we are obviously committed to the call for ideas and the call for sites running from the summer through to October for the call for sites, and then the broader call for ideas running until the end of the year. There'll then be a process of validation and undertaking technical assessment, particularly for bids that we receive, and we expect that will run from November through to the spring. And then from the new year, we'll start considering ideas that come through as well. At this point, we're probably going to take a issues and actions style approach to those. So the ideas will be presented in a format that we're used to, and then there will be an opportunity for us to respond. But I should also just add, on terms of the ideas, where we can map things as far as possible, we will do that and make that available. So once all the information comes out, there is a mapping element which we will be keeping up to date on a frequent basis, so that any spatial or site specific ideas that are coming forward, we can start to map those out for folk as well. And then, as Lisa's alluded to in her presentation, we'll then have detailed site assessment, which will likely take us through next summer. engaging with various folks as well during that to again make sure that we're all on board in terms of deliverability. We'll then undertake seminars with elected members, most likely following recess next summer. And then look to prepare the proposed plan, which I certainly see as being something that involves a bit more going back and forth, and maybe we will be asking for further information or confirmation on specific elements, just to inform the likes of the delivery programme and any allocation summary that might be in the next LDP. So I thought it was just worth mentioning also that our development plan scheme talks about a proposed plan in September 2027. However, we're fully aware that Scottish Government target is to have all new local development plans in Scotland adopted by May 28. Based on our current programming, we're approximately 12 months beyond that. And in addition to the new LDP process to take account of, there are in fact 2 elections which will take time away from our programme. So obviously a Scottish election next year, followed by a local election in 2027. And during the pre-engagement period, there are restrictions on some of our activities that we can undertake. So that does go away with a bit of time. We do hope that the examination, with the gate check being in place, that the examination may not take as long as what we have experienced previously, but at this stage it's pretty unknown at this stage, and we won't get a gauge on that until other authorities start going through that process as well. And then just finally, in terms of trying to bring all of this together, we thought it was just important to emphasise that the ideas that we have coming forward, and that includes yourselves and the sites that come forward and are identified as preferred options. These will all influence the spatial strategy for the period 2029 to 2039. We are looking at the potential of requiring local policies tailored to Aberdeenshire, and the guidance does allow us to do that. I think one of the things we need to be mindful of there is ensuring that any local policies that we have, for example, on rural development, are defensible during that examination process, and we can clearly demonstrate and justify why we're seeking to take an approach that either deviates or is in addition to what is in national planning framework. The next LDP is going to be particularly place heavy, and we will look to refine settlement statements going forward as well, given that the policy element is likely to be much lighter, and given that we will look to take forward national policies in addition to the local policies if we do find a need for those to come forward. There will be opportunities for testing of local policies as well during next year as well. And then ultimately the identification of preferred options in the proposed plan. So on behalf of the team, I just want to say thank you very much for your time this morning. I hope you have found the session to be informative ahead of the formal launch. And we're now welcoming your thoughts and any questions that you might have. And at this point, I'd like to bring in the team and David McLennan, Service Manager, who's going to help facilitate the Q&A session.
Thanks for that, Ailsa, and thanks everyone for attending. I know there was quite a lot of information to sort of run through there, and in terms of, if you want the opportunity to, if you've got any site-specific questions, we'll be publishing our contact details alongside the slides after the event if you want to get in touch with us directly. But in terms of any questions at the moment, and let's say I know there was quite a lot to run through there, if there's any sort of questions more generally about the sort of process, now's the time to sort of ask them. In terms of the questions we've had so far in the chat, I think, Michael, your question on whether the form is editable, that's been answered. Natasha, you had a question there about local place plans. And yeah, the local place plans, they are not just for us to consider. I think we're colleagues in development management in that as well. As soon as our local place plan is registered, it is something that we'll need to take account of in any sort of development management decision as well, as when we're putting the next sort of local plan together. So in terms of the other questions, Steve, I think you'd asked if it would be possible to upload, and I can just see that question's now been answered there as well. So is there any, while the team sort of run through the questions in the chat, is there any questions anyone wants to ask just now? Hi, Natasha.
Hello. It was just to say Michael's question about whether the bid sites would be published in the public domain prior to the publication and consultation of the proposed plan hasn't been answered. And I was just going to duplicate that question. I saw that Michael had answered it, so it was just really looking for a response to that.
Yeah, I can take that one if you want, David. The bids will be available, so we're actually using Uniform, which is the same system that is used to manage planning applications when they're submitted. So they will be available in the public domain. They will have a reference number that's very similar to a traditional planning applications. I think we've gone with something like BID 2025 and then the individual number related to the site, and they will be available via the public register to view. We'll also map them on our interactive mapping as well as we go. I think the original intention for that was that the bids would be available for communities prior to the close of the call for ideas. But obviously we realised at the end of the year that November-December period is quite busy. So whether or not communities have the opportunity to fully digest the bids, and obviously there's a validation process for them to go through as well. So our intention is to make the bids public, and we will map them as they come through, and they will be available on the public register. And any information that we request from you during the assessment phase, we'll also upload, and we have the option to either make that public or not. I hope that helps, Natasha. Or maybe Michael, who had the original question.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the team just now? I see, Daniel, your question, Lisa's just answered that in the chat. And Ryan, I think you were asking about whether we'd be accepting bids after the deadline. I don't think so. We'll be setting the timescales for the submission of bids. It'll be the end of October this year. Natasha, you got your hand up again there?
Sorry, yeah, me again, being a pest. For the bids that are being submitted, and I appreciate that you don't want to be kind of overloaded with the information, and mindful of the question that Steve had asked, but from a contractual point that we have with our landowners, different contracts have different requirements, and some might have that we have to do our best endeavours to get a site allocated. And where that takes me is it possible within kind of that form to give you a link to additional information? The worry that I have is, and I totally appreciate the level of work that you guys have, if we don't provide all the information that we have at the outset, if we do have a contract that requires our best endeavours and we've not been seen to be providing you with all the information that we have, that creates a conflict with the contract that we have with the landowner. So it's just trying to get that balance right. And if I could give a link to where supplementary documents were sitting, then I've fulfilled my contractual obligations, but without kind of bombarding you with information. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so. You're wanting to, if you've got that information there and the landowner says, well, why did you not submit this in case a sort of site's not sort of taken forward?
Yeah.
And in that regard, I guess we would be able to say, after the sort of process as to why maybe we didn't require that information, whether that would be enough for you. If a site was just a complete non-starter, I'm not going to give examples of what that might be, but yeah, there might not be the request, or it might not have made any sort of difference. There might be a particular reason why a site wasn't come forward. So do you think that's the kind of thing that would help you in terms of responding to that from any sort of client who's maybe saying to you, that you certainly wasn't seen as your best endeavours for taking that information through? I think Lisa's also put in a bit there about how you can sort of put additional sort of information in, but I don't know, would that help at all?
It might, if I can almost kind of give you a link to like a SharePoint then it's up to you whether you open the link, but at least I've provided the link and the information. So from a landowner point, if the site wasn't allocated, at least I can demonstrate that I've, given you everything that you need. And then, I'd have the details of why the site wasn't taken forward. But if I didn't give the link to the SharePoint, I could be in a position where the landowner, and I appreciate the process that you're going through, says to me, well, appreciate it wasn't allocated. However, if you had submitted X document, that might have made the difference. It's not so much a planning point, it's a contractual point. But if I can give you a link, as I say, whether you open it or not, that's for you, but I've probably fulfilled that obligation.
Just on that, Natasha, there is the opportunity to put in a supporting statement. So it's whether or not you wanted to put in a link there. Would we have access to open that link throughout the whole process? Is there an end date to how long that link would be live?
I think if it's on SharePoint, no. If it was like a WeTransfer link, then yes. But I guess also I don't know if that then creates another question for you about whether you as the authority are able to open those kind of SharePoint links. Because I know that I know that if I was to give you a WeTransfer link, for instance, I don't know if your IT would allow you to open it.
I wouldn't know that one off the top of my head either at this point. I mean, certainly the form asks for which technical assessments have been undertaken, and we may still ask for those technical assessments to enable us to assess the site. So it could be that we'll ask them in any case.
Okay.
I think if you include a link, and maybe if you want to send me an example and we can test it out before we go live, and we can maybe follow up with some additional information when we go around with the presentation and the additional information, and we can clarify that point. But what I would say is that we're trying to be quite clear in the form as to what we've required and whether or not you communicate that to your clients, and just say kind of the authority haven't asked for it up front. It may be that despite you providing a link to that information, we may still request it through the formal mechanisms.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, Ilse. Thank you, and
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, but happy to do some testing of that offline if you want to, Natasha.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'll pick that up with you separately then. Thank you.
Any other questions for the team? Just in terms of the ones in the chat, Philip, yes, I think changes to settlement boundaries or amendments would be one that we'd be looking for in the call for ideas. I do have a list of outstanding ones that have been raised by people in various towns that want things changed or weren't happy with particular boundaries or lines that were drawn in the last local development plan, so we'll certainly need to be picking those up. Karen, you're asking if you can save the draft bid and return to this at a later date. I'll ask the team that one. I would assume so. I'll just get some confirmation there.
Hi, David. I've just replied to that, and in testing the forms, we've certainly been able to save answers and return to the form before submitting it. So yeah, you should be able to save it.
I think, David, there's a question in there about policies and how much detail we're looking for in terms of policy ideas. As much detail as you have, justification for any policies that you might either wish to see changed or policies that you'd like to see introduced, ensuring that they can be justified, and then we can pick those up in the round when the call for ideas closes. And it may be that into next year when we start considering everything that's come forward, that there are key themes emerging. I use rural development as the example most of the time, but it may be that we decide to hold some further engagement just to bat some of that out a wee bit more, see what policies are going to be appropriate for the area and which may not be. So it may be that next year we decide to hold some either informal engagements or some roundtables, but that will largely depend on the scale and nature of the ideas coming forward. We're hoping for a really good response rate, given that it's open for what will be almost 6 months. Whereas I have heard on the grapevine that other authorities haven't had such a significant response to the call for ideas. So with it being a new process, I think lots of folk, both within authorities and industry and within communities, are still really feeling their way through how to form the proposed plan and what engagement needs to go in preparing it as well. I think folk are really starting to feel the loss of the main issues report, where you can have that debate in public. But certainly in response to the question regarding policy matters coming through the call for ideas, as much information and justification as possible.
I think there was a second part to that question as well about MPF4, and that is an issue that our members have raised throughout the sessions that we've had with them at the sort of different area committees. You know, the policies, as you all know, in MPF4 are quite sort of detailed and quite sort of specific, more so than maybe potentially Scottish sort of guidance has been before. But what we have said to members is that there is an opportunity there to deviate from the policies of MPF4 if there's a particular sort of local need, and it really just comes down to they'll assess the level of justification that we can put forward as a local authority, should that be the case, or if that's a road that we want to go down.
Natasha, you want to come in
Natasha,
again?
yeah.
Yes, I know that Daniel asked about the file size for submissions, and the answer to that was 5 megabytes. That seems quite small. Would there be scope to increase that to 10?
I think that's for the initial sort of form and sort of submission. It might be one we might need to come back with you, because we will be constrained a lot by our own IT. And I think, as you said before, if you're putting that information in, telling us what other information is available, or if a later date, if we're coming back to you and asking for more information, we probably might not have the same restrictions. But that's one we can check in with once we speak to our IT colleagues about some of the questions that you asked earlier as well.
Yeah, that would be great if you could. I'm just mindful of kind of our supporting information, and I don't just mean like additional documents, just like the bid document itself, and they're all over 10. And whilst I can condense them, 5 just seems really small for that. Daniel or Michael might have other views on it, but to me it just seems pretty small.
No, it's a positive we're getting all this information into review, but no, thanks for that. It's a good sort of question on, but we will need to just get a bit of advice, particularly on some of the more technical aspects of this sort of system. And Michael, you've got your hand up. Was that following up from that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of reiterate what Natasha said. I think that 5 megabytes is probably too small, just based on some of the information that, you know, if there's imagery and things in it, and that's always going to push things up. So yeah, I mean, if that could be increased, that would be beneficial. I think as well, just off the back of Natasha's point, and what has kind of been niggling me as a concern with their, I suppose, that the suggestion that, you know, we may not be submitting supporting information along with the bids, but and you know, I appreciate what you say, that, you know, there may be an opportunity if a site is identified as being an officer's preference, but there's a piece of information that you guys would like to see, then, you know, you'll be able to come back to us and ask for it. But, you know, whether the site's preferred or not, you know, it's highly likely that we'll still run those sites right through to examination stage. So I suppose the concern that I would have is, if we don't submit the information and we end up in an examination situation and a reporter turns around and says that they're not allocating the site because, you know, there's a landscape impact, or there's a potential drainage impact or something of that nature, and, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to submit the information to rebuff that, then, you know, that would give me a concern.
Yeah, I think when it comes to for those sort of types of issues, that would be the ones that would potentially be sort of not putting a site sort of forward. I don't think we would just be doing that offhand without engaging or giving you an opportunity to sort of come back with additional information to address those sort of concerns. But I appreciate what you're saying in terms of once you get to that stage, the reporter might say, well, you didn't submit that information, and then you're like, well, yeah, we did have that, but the local authority didn't give us the opportunity to sort of submit it.
Can I just come in on that, David? Because when we move from the proposed plan consultation prior to the examination, I think there's an expectation that we will try and resolve any issues prior to it being submitted for examination. So perhaps through the proposed plan and moving from what will be the proposed plan to possibly a modified proposed plan prior to examination. I think that's probably where some of that for sites that are either not taken forward or identified as reasonable alternatives. I think that's where that information would probably come in, because I do acknowledge that in past examinations, the reporter has lent on not taking a site forward because of information that wasn't submitted. I don't know how they will take it this time round, and perhaps that's a question that we can raise with the DPA when we start talking about the proposed plan. But certainly we're some way off that and being able to confirm what arrangements will be in place as we move. But certainly it is different to previous proposed plans where you submitted your response and we put it in a Schedule 4 and it was then examined. I think there is now an expectation that there will be some negotiation as we move from the proposed plan prior to the examination.
Okay, thanks for that. That's helpful.
Thanks. See, Andrew McPherson, you've raised a question about the role of community consultation in the final incorporation of sites. That's a difficult one to sort of answer. Obviously, it's easier if there's a community sort of support. It makes it easier for sites to sort of come through the sort of process. But I would say in the same way that we look at local sort of place plans, you know, the involvement or the views of the sort of community are one of a range of factors that we would take into account when assigning sites. Is that sort of the angle you were coming at in terms of the question?
Yes, it is. We're writing our local place plan at the moment, and landowners have brought sites actually at that level. I appreciate that there'll be a time and place for that under this process, but that's already caused a lot of feedback, and it's very, very early doors, and probably not the place of the local place plan to incorporate some of that. So it's just trying to figure out how all that fits in from a sort of very early stage development, and where and how best to incorporate it. I think it's just even the acknowledgement that there will be a consultation is probably good and useful at this point. There will be public consultation.
Yeah, no, definitely on what's there, and I think for one of the benefits of local place plans for any sort of developers looking to submit sites is that they do give, you know, a snapshot or a view of the community and how they would see their community sort of developing or place, and you know, obviously what contribution, you know, any new development could make to that. I don't know, Emma, is there anything else you want to add to that in terms of the role of sort of local place plans in the process, in terms of Andrew's question?
No, I don't think so, David. I think you've covered everything.
Yeah, it's exactly what the LPPs need to include is a bit vague, or at least when we've been writing it, it has been. So it's whether they do or do not include potential development sites from developers is a question that's up in the air for R1 at the moment.
Yeah, no, we can happily, if you want to get in sort of touch after the sort of meeting, though, we do have a range of information available on the website on LPPs, what they can't include. Ultimately, it comes down to the community, just how detailed they want to be, but identifying sites for development or sites that they think should be protected. You know, these are parts of a number of the sort of local place plans we've had in, but if you want any sort of additional guidance or support from anyone in the team, please just get in touch with us after the event. We'd be happy to help.
That's really useful. Thank you.
We got any other questions at this time? We will definitely come back on the 5 megabyte be 10 megabyte, and we will be in touch with our colleagues in IT after the event to look at that one. See that comment's getting a lot of likes, so that's definitely something we'll look at before we formally launch the ideas and see what we can do.
Okay, if it's all going quiet then, obviously we're available after the meeting if anything comes to you. But on the final slide that we'll share with you, we've got both the contact details for the policy team, but also the place information and delivery team. And just to flag, there'll be correspondence going out with regards to the existing site audit. So there may be a flurry in some of your inboxes once we issue that. And there will be correspondence and a newsletter going out along with the press release promoting the call for ideas, which we hope to launch very soon, like I say. But hopefully that's been of use to you, and we've made really good time today, and we will look to share the slides this afternoon if we can. And I guess there's nothing else for me to do but to say thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we receive some really good deliverable bids through the call for sites, and we're really looking forward to seeing the ideas that come through as well to help us shape what will be the next LDP. So thank you very much and goodbye.